So if I talk Internet of Things, and here's some Internet of Things. Here's a rather large one with a petrol engine in it. You'd go, fog what? What a thing got to do with fog? And actually, this is one of the fundamental things that we need to know about IoT. That IoT doesn't come on its own. A single IoT device sitting on a shelf is just an ornament. It actually comes with network connectivity. It comes with cloud, and it comes with this whole relationship infrastructure of networks that are increasingly interconnecting and building and growing. And what they've rather cleverly called this idea of cloud getting low enough to the things on the earth is that they're calling it fog. And actually, it's to do with things that interact with one another in a peer-to-peer way. It's about individual cloud relationships. It's about cloud to cloud, and it's about all that sort of mistiness between how these devices connect and interrelate. And so I'm going to be talking about IoT and the context of what's different about it and what attention you need to pay to it. But first of all, the reason I'm talking about this is that we as security professionals really do need to learn to avoid management pitfalls that we've encountered in the past. And so my key message is beware the security management pitfall. And I don't know those of you who've looked at SABSA as an architecture. It's a nice the way that you do through different abstraction layers, and you sort of have components at the bottom and you work up. And the big message of SABSA says when you start at the top, the contextual, in other words, know what the business is trying to do, know what the organization is that you're playing into, and the commercial situation if it's a business, so that you understand the context. That way you know what's important and you know what the interactions are. Actually, when you look at a business, we must look at the full scope. I've actually talked to people who say, oh, I don't do the security of that bit. Well, when they report on that to their executive, I don't know if they say, yeah, well, you're secure apart from the bits I don't know about. It doesn't sound very reassuring, and I think as security professionals, we have to make sure we understand the full scope. I've actually seen people give green presentations to the board, for example, because they don't do that. And the final part of my message is you've got to choose the right concept for your solution, because if you get the concept wrong, yeah, you got the context, but actually, so just imagine a ship and a submarine. If your concept is you stay above the water, then the submarine is going to be a nasty shock to you. It's got a different concept. It's about going under the water and actually being okay when it does that. So if we get it wrong and we don't think of these pitfalls, then we can be blind to risk. Something can be going on outside of our normal window of observation, and it will be creating risk to our organization. The other thing that we can do is if we get the context wrong, we suddenly find that stuff keeps breaking it. So we slap on another Elastoplast solution and we try and fix it with another way, and we do more reports and we send more people in to try and solve it. And actually we're pursuing diminishing returns. And if we got the concept right, then we'd solve it a different way. So trying to stop the submarine sinking is not a great thing to be doing. And actually, if the only tools we've got are the tools that are based on particular concepts, then when the next one comes along, we'll simply use the same tool. So everything actually does look like a nail if all you have is a hammer. And so it's really important as professionals that we learn from that, because actually, here's some examples of where it took us quite a while to learn, and sometimes I still read things. I read one the other day, which didn't understand that restricting scope to protecting the corporate network was actually a rather naive view in the current world. They actually said, we're going to protect the users from reaching unsafe internet sites and filter them for you. I'm going, what the heck are the users doing inside the network anyway? Shouldn't they be out there dealing with the internet on the internet? Treating cloud services like one-to-one outsourcing. Let's send the auditors in and review the cloud service provider. Actually, that's not how cloud services were set up as utilities to achieve. Yet some companies and some regulators still struggle with that. I think the focusing on protection and then forgetting about detection and response was a big blind spot we had for a very long time. And actually, when the NIST cybersecurity framework came out, I think it was a bit of a revelation to people. If you start to score yourself and you got lots and lots of information on the protect piece, and then when it goes detect and respond, there's far less activity in those spaces. So another example of we didn't quite get the concept right, so perhaps we weren't putting our effort in the right places. And then insufficient knowledge when new technologies come in. So I won't ask you for a show of hands about how many people are experienced in the stack you find in a mobile device or actually understand App Store security really well, because typically you get a different show of hands if you ask for Windows environment or networks inside corporations. You get a lot more people with background in that. Then when we come to cloud containers, I went to a great talk this morning that reminded us that people don't even know how to secure these things right yet. And I remember giving a presentation. I actually asked all the CISOs in the room, so how well are you getting on with your training your people in Docker? And they went, what's Docker? So keeping up with those concepts and those technologies is really important. So that's where IoT comes in. So back to IoT. Well, we hear about the headlines of IoT, don't we? And you can't see an IoT story without the Kayla doll. And the Germans finally saying, you know, throw this thing in the bin. And actually, that's one example. I don't know whether that particular signage could be called IoT, but it has those characteristics of possibly internet connected in terms of delivery. Don't patch it right. Hey, you end up with it getting ransomware on it. Okay, that's the consumer side of things. These devices are not built with security thinking designed into them. What does that mean to a world that we've got to secure? Okay, let's do something a bit more serious. So, here's the Jeep Cherokee. I give this talk to my students at Royal Holloway. And you know what? It's not too bad a design story in terms of security to start out with. What they recognized was that actually audio, video, and then the phone and road assist, all of which are really needing to communicate out over the wireless network, should be separated from door locks, air conditioning, accelerators, brakes, and steering on the CAN bus. Okay, and actually there's a little firewall they put in called the V850. For those of you who've studied this work by Miller et al. And okay, really interesting. Except the trouble is that the V850 could be reprogrammed from that side of the network. Now, wait a minute, you mean I can reprogram that from the untrusted side? Doesn't that defeat the point of having it? So clearly, I don't know whether that was an implementation issue or a design flaw. But actually, this isn't the point I want to make from this slide. The point is that security design's sort of there, not really quite right. Security management, terrible. So what do? They of course recall the vehicles. And everyone was driving their vehicles back to the Jeep dealer. And people complained on social media. They said, this is a disgrace, that the attacker can attack it over the network, but I have to drive to the nearest Jeep dealer and stop work and lose money and be inconvenienced. And actually Jeep went, oh dear, you could imagine all the debates and management. So they solved it. What they did is they sent out a letter with those included in them. Well, we as professionals go, what? Thank you, Jeep. You've now created a brand new attack vector for cars. All I've got to do is to send you a letter with the right letterhead and a USB stick telling you to patch your system. And they've set it as the standard to do it. So in the world of IoT, we haven't really got the security management sorted and we haven't got the security design. So, but Paul, is IoT relevant to me? Well, that's the whole point of this talk, isn't it? Which is it's your job to work out whether it is. But I thought afterwards, that's not very helpful, is it? All right, so what I'll do, I'll show you what I did for a bank, and then you can think about your world. So here's the bank. And what we came up with, well, actually, payments, we get IoT on wearables and other devices, and that's part of their payment infrastructure. And is that an IoT device? Well, yeah, actually, it sort of is, particularly when it's run by different networks. And then we look down the the right-hand side, and we said, new opportunities. Actually, they're insurance companies with black boxes in cars, aren't they, that will give you a different insurance rate if you're prepared to be monitored. And actually, there's now an insurance company that will do black boxes on people. Yes, it's a Fitbit or monitor, but if you keep wearing it, it will do that. Well, wait a minute, it's not IoT, and how does that fit into that business model? And it's got personal data, and it may have sensitive data in it. And then what about black boxes in home and office? And so you could see that opportunity. Loans and leasing, wear and tear monitoring. You know, the idea of actually, you don't actually buy a device or a piece of technology anymore. You simply pay a subscription fee. And if there's wear and tear on it, you pay a bit more. And so IoT starts to monitor these things. This idea of pay per use, that once you return the vehicle and parked it, then you get sent the bill. And it's all IoT functionality that's enabling this type of thing. What about trading? Micro-generation of energy. What about the trading networks for that? I bet we start seeing that, where you can start having open trading, selling your power back to the grid. What about agriculture, where sensors next to the plant will say how many bugs have been going near the plant, how well the rain's been falling in that field, how well it's fertilized. Actually, that's the bank. What's that good? Oh, they went, commodities. You mean that data flow could tell me how well crops are doing, and therefore what their production might be in the commodity market? Ooh, that's getting interesting. Hey, what's that do with IoT and security? Perhaps I can monitor it. Perhaps I can tap other people's fields. Interesting. And then risks in the office. Building management systems that started off with operational technology, now getting the extra sensor, the extra detector, the extra wireless thing. Meeting rooms, the digital recorders, the extra extensions. I don't know if you all have your meeting rooms on separate networks, but you start to say, ooh, should they be managed differently? Is it IoT? And then wearables. And then what about shadow IT? Shadow IT, how about someone doing their business on their car as they drive along? One of my friends said, my car took all my contacts out of my phone and uploaded it into itself in case it was useful. It didn't even ask me, just did it. Somehow some trust had been established to allow it, or lack of trust. So what will it mean to the home? If Alexa is switched on and listening, what does it mean to that working from home environment? So, have I convinced you that you might have some IoT, or there might be some of that coming into your lives? Okay, well, let's say that I have convinced you a bit. So let's look at the characteristics of IoT and the fogginess of it. So the first thing about IoT is a lot of the vendors in the space, particularly consumer, but actually I think we illustrate it with a car. And actually there are many, many other examples and illustrations where they're coming from in their thinking in terms of their products and their services is not traditional IT security thinking. So they just doesn't cross their mind to do things in the way that would be safe and secure. So they don't really design it in because they've got lack of knowledge. And then they say to me, actually, Paul, do you realize that a single penny extra price on this little sensor is going to make a difference to it in the marketplace? And you're going to try and put encryption on it? And what do you think that's going to cost? And so the commercial barriers are actually quite significant for some IoT deployments. And how do we overcome that? And then finally, the lack of integration experience. And even in the IoT Security Foundation, I found that certainly a few years ago when I started talking to largely the people on the chip side of the house and the OEM board, I said, how do you manage these devices? And if they get attacked, will it tell me? Can you feed my sock with some information about what's going on? Will it tell me its patch status so that I can look after it? And they were going, well, I didn't think about that. I just thought about it possibly looking after itself and didn't think of it integrating in a corporation. So this lack of integration experience is very different from the traditional IT space. So I thought it was a return to the 1980s of IT, where if the customers didn't really start pushing hard, then you didn't get it. And back in the 1980s, I was in a conversation with an applications vendor saying to him, look, could the users have individual logons, please? Rather than one just blanket shared user ID on this system. And of course, he answered me with the standard answer. He said, you're the only one who's actually ever asked for that. So the next meeting we had with them, we filled the room from all the other banks who'd only ever asked for it, just to make the point that all these customers. And that's what it felt like back then with those systems. And in fact, I was chatting to someone over lunch, and they reminded me, a return to the 1980s, this is operational technology today. This is industrial control systems were not built. The things that run process plants and things like that were not built with security in mind. And now we're catching up. And we're just about specifying them, and we're just about put them in procurement language so we start to get them in. And that's a journey. When I was at BP, we started back in 2002. So it takes a long time to change some of these things, and some of the devices and legacy that we live with in that. IoT is in a similar space, except the conversations aren't as active as they are in OT. So that you don't get the vendors lining up saying, yeah, we get it. Now will you make it commercially feasible for us to sell it to you? The other thing I want to remind you about is that IoT is a system of systems. So it's cloud mediated, but there's also peer-to-peer. And it's ecosystems of ecosystems. And someone in the IT Security Foundation said to me, it's like fractal. So you think you're looking at something here, and then, and it's got a subsystem and a cloud and a relationship, and that then relates to this other system. And actually, the cars are like that. Cars are actually collections of subsystems. And a lot of IoT works in that way. So when you look at this value chain, it's from semiconductor manufacturer right through to eventually the customer. But if the customer doesn't ask for it, it's not going to happen. So the call for action, gain some knowledge. Help define some dynamic standards that actually will keep up with a very dynamic environment of IoT. And then architect your own security management so that you can incorporate the concept of fog and thing rather than try and play it backwards into corporate IT, because it's not going to work that way. So what will it mean to have third parties running third parties, etc., being your extended supply chain in that? And please create demand in procurement. Well, a bit like the guy who bought the razor company because you like the razor. I actually joined the IT Security Foundation because I like the product. It's there. The compliance framework is the dynamically evolving structure of how IoT systems should be built. And it's free. You can just download it on the website. So that's available for you to give to IoT suppliers and start to put it into your procurement. But please, let's not have too many more standards. I know it sounds odd when I pointed to one, but that's much more like IETF. It's a much more dynamic thing than yet another ISO standard for IoT. I want us to put IoT into existing standards rather than create too many more. But we must have a dynamic body of knowledge from which we grow. How-to best practice guides, test labs, smart buildings, architectures, and also support to the UK work. So those are things that we're doing. So I really would encourage you to think of the new concept, work out ahead of time now, or perhaps it's too late. Actually, when you look around, you go, oh my goodness, I've got thousands of blasted things. Now I've got to get my arms around them and try and sort out how we manage them. But I would really encourage you to think of this new concept. And actually, the way you deal with it is, we've got to change the market dynamic. If we don't ask for it, and I talk as an enterprise type person, if we don't ask for it, we won't get it. So please do join in creating standards and actually helping the vendors get to the right place, because they won't get there on their own. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, question at the back. If you watch out, they'll throw it at you.
Hi, Jason Creasy, Jericano. Interesting presentation, Paul. Really like it. The terminology is always a tough one, and we found that different people have different terminology for the same thing, and different terminology for different things. But in this case, you talk about IoT. There's also a thing called IIoT. There's industrial control systems, ICS. There's process control systems, PCS. Can you just let us know what you think the relationship is? Are they all different things, or are there similar names for the same thing?
Okay, so the question is, what about all the terminology? I use Internet of Things as an overarching blanket that covers multiple use cases in multiple industries, but with the internet fog type management construct around it. So SCADA, industrial control, OT, which manages cyber physical, is much more about a controlled and managed network. In a very, and they talk about isolating it as the control mechanism. I know it's not a great argument to do, but that's still the answer that people follow. For IoT, that's a nonsense. You can't isolate it. It uses the internet as part of its life. So that's how I define it. So think of the internet bit is really important at the front of it. The industrial Internet of Things, well, that's it. That's a use case of a particular application of IoT in my view. But I do see some people sneak it into the more managed sector as well. For me, it isn't managed in a traditional network way. Does that help?
It does, thank you.
I want the front. Duck? No, it's heading your way. There we go.
Thanks, Paul. Can you just expand a little bit into how this is all going to look when we've got robots connected to the internet and their things too?
Well, the robots are IoT. Yeah, they travel slightly slower than cars, thank goodness. To me, it's just part of the cyber-physical interaction. So most robots are using cloud processing or back processing rather than being autonomous in their own right. So I don't see any difference to the fact that it's moving an arm or it's measuring a temperature or it's listening on a microphone. I mean, for me, it's all part of the same thing.
I was thinking more of the ones like Boston Dynamics that wander about.
Well, that's just mobile IoT. And say there'll be big ones with 4 wheels and petrol engines.
Right.
So I think the interesting bit about robots, though, is the concept of the cobot. Because at the moment, the industrial robots that we're all used to, the great big ones that do the cars, they're caged off from humans. And sadly, someone has been killed in a factory by a robot. He was trying to fix the systems, and he disabled the safety, and it crushed him. And a cobot is human aware. So the cobot will come alongside you and sort of supposed to look after you and be aware. I don't know what mine would be. It would probably pat me on the head all the time or something. I don't know.
Thank you.